All right, so can we start out praying? First of all, good job, band, making it through that. I think we'll change your name to Waiting Room because you're just waiting to see what happens, and I'm feeling like I've been kind of sick all week long too, and hopefully I'll be able, I haven't talked a whole lot, so we'll see how this goes. So let me just pray. Father, we thank you for the fact that you're good, that you have all things under your control. God, you know where we're coming from. You even know where we're going to and if it's right or if it's not, and you'll let us go because you're a graceful and a gracious and a patient God. And so, Father, if we run from you, you'll continue to come behind and chase after us. And if we run to you, you'll accept us regardless of where we've been or what kind of mess we've made. And so, God, I thank you for that and pray that we would see you for who you are this morning, the God who loves us where we're at. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So, just a couple things. If you have a spot on your seat next to you that's got one of these and a pen and stuff like that, you're welcome to take notes. You're also encouraged to fill this out. And if you're not a paper person, because you've gone paperless, you can jump on our Wi-Fi. And the password to it is just Discovery with a capital D and a capital Y. And you can follow along on YouVersion, which will have all the verses. It'll have a spot where you can actually fill in the blank. And as soon as you enter anything, it'll save it for you so you can go back to it at any time. So you're encouraged to follow along, to let us know that you're here. And at the end, we'll collect this. And if you have any questions, if anything I said doesn't make sense, if I flat out got it wrong, go ahead and write it on here along with your prayer requests. And if there are any, I answer them at the end. I don't turn it over, so I don't know who asks. And I'll correct whatever I made wrong. I'll tell you I made a mistake, or I'll clarify whatever doesn't make sense so that nobody has to leave here confused. So what we've been talking about and what we're trying to do here, if you can see, there's this 25,000 up front, and we're putting marbles in it. And the reason we're doing that is because this year we've decided that we want to count the wins. And the wins is an acronym, and it's helping us identify where God is working in us or how God is working through us. And so when God does anything in us or through us, we count that as a win because we get to experience God firsthand, either working alongside of Him or He does something in us, and that's awesome. And so we figured that over the course of this year, it seems like a lot now, but it's barely February, that we should be able to collectively gather 25,000 moments where we've experienced God working in us or through us. And so every time we've got one, we take a marble and we stick it in these numbers. And by the end of the year, I am praying and hoping that they will be filled. Not only that, but you guys will be filled with stories of God's goodness working in your life. And so at the end, when I'm done with the message and as they're playing a reflection song, you guys are welcome to come up, and you're encouraged to come up. There's some marbles on this side and some marbles on that side. Put whatever it is that are the wins for your week. And the win stands, it's an acronym. And so just to recap, the W is walk. So as you go, Jesus' entire life was one big journey from He was born and He's going to Jerusalem. But all along the way, He was constantly interrupted. And every time He was interrupted, He engaged in the interruption. And it turned into an opportunity for Him to display or to offer some kind of grace, hope, healing, or something like that. And so the same thing happens for us. Wherever you're going, any interruption is more like an opportunity than something that you would consider a problem, okay, if we want to look at it like Jesus. And so when we're interrupted, the I stands, we talked about this last week, stands for interact. And so whenever there's an interruption, we want to interact with whoever is in front of us. And it's not always easy to interact with people. Some people are very afraid of it, and you're not a vocal person unless you really know somebody. You don't do groups, and so you're not going to talk in a group, but maybe one-on-one you might mention a word or two, or you'll at least grunt answers to questions somebody asks you. But at the end of the day, when we interact, we want to ask some questions of people so we can listen to understand, not just hear what they're saying so that we can hijack it and tell our own stories. And we talked about that last week. Now, today, we're talking about N. And N stands for noticing. And for some of us, this is difficult. Some of us can't remember what we're looking for when we walk from the kitchen to the bedroom. And so we're looking around. We might be staring it right at what we came in there to get, but we don't know it, as we just couldn't notice it. Or if you're a man, you ask your wife, Honey, where's the, and you just, you go looking in the refrigerator for whatever it is you just asked for. Honey, do we have any milk? And you open up and you're staring at the milk, but you're too blind to notice it, okay? This happens. It's kind of normal. But since we're talking about noticing, I want to just take a quiz, okay? Some of you guys have seen these things before. And maybe you played this game when you were a little kid. Did anybody ever have a highlights magazine? Or go to the doctor's office and you got to see the highlights magazine? Okay, so tell me, and you can just shout it out, because I didn't put on there what you're looking for, but you might be able to see some things. What do you see? The hamburger. Okay, there's a hamburger right there. Eyeglasses on the back of that frog, yeah. Scissors. Where are the scissors? Oh, look at that, right there. Anybody see the apple? Yep, and a potato. A what? Lightning. Where's the lightning? Like lightning and a leaf and a feather. I don't know where the feather is, but there's a saw. Rolling with a ruler. Oh, yeah, look at that. He's got a ruler. Okay. And a heart and an eye. Oh, my gosh, I can't. Look, we found it. It's all there. It's all there. Good job. Okay. That's good. That's good. I'll give you another one because these are kind of fun. Okay. This one you actually get to know what you're looking for. Can you see him? Whoa, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. And that. That. I didn't know that would stay on there. Toothbrush on the net. There's a toothbrush. And the wheels right there. Something on the serving platter? A hat. Pizza in the umbrella right there. Paintbrush on the table. Right here. The birds on her skirt. We got a thing right there, a mushroom hat. Yep. Waldo's at the grill. Here's Waldo. Carrot on her hat. Whose hat? Oh, this girl right here. Yeah, look at that. See, look, you guys can do this. Okay? You guys can do this. Now, we're going to try something that's a little bit more difficult. You ever seen one of these things? Okay? I'm not going to say what's in there. I just want you to look and see if you can see it. Okay? Relax your eyes. It's three-dimensional. There's really something there. I don't know if it'll work from a distance. Do that cross-eyed thing. Anybody figured it out yet? Now, some of you, have any of you ever been able to see the magic eye things like this? Yeah, some of you, and some of you struggle. I'll just tell you, this one right here, it's actually a shark. There's a shark right about here. There's another one down here, and there's something here. I don't know what this is. Okay? You just have to trust me. Now, if you want to try it afterwards, I will blow it up full size on my computer here, and you can see it. I've seen it numerous times. But it's one of those magic eye things where suddenly everything just shifts, and what looks like a two-dimensional piece of paper is like three-dimensional. You can literally kind of move your body, and you can see the shark move and stuff like that. Now, why am I doing that? Because we're talking about noticing. And I wanted to illustrate a point that I think we know inherently, but we don't always get if somebody asked us to explain it. And it's simply this. Here's why some of you are better at those than others. It's because being perceptive takes practice. Being perceptive takes practice. And so we might be talking over these last few weeks about wins, and we ask you at the end, what have you seen God do in you, or what have you seen God do through you? Do you have any wins that you can share? You want to pick up and put any marbles in? Could you report any of these? And some of you are like, I don't really want to say no because I feel like the answer should be yes, but no. Okay, that's okay. It's really okay because perceiving what God is doing, noticing what God is doing, it takes practice. Okay, just like anything takes practice. You know, those of you who are married, you've figured out how to, hopefully, you guys have been married 21 years. Hopefully you've figured out how to love one another. Okay, and you might still get it wrong, and, then you just put that in the don't do that again pile, and it just takes practice. And if you make a mistake, you realize, okay, I shouldn't have done that, and you fix it. But these things, noticing what God is doing, noticing what God might want to do in somebody else, it takes practice. But I want you to know that you can do it. And so what we're going to do, in order to notice things, I'm just going to give you some ground rules, okay? 2 things need to happen. First of all, you need to be observant, okay? You need to be looking. So when I put up the highlights magazines, you guys were looking, and in the first one, you didn't really know what you were looking for, but you could figure it out anyway. And the second one, you knew what you were looking for, and maybe you went to find it, because that's the second thing. You can't just be looking. You have to know what you're looking for. And so we're going to go through that. Anybody watch this new show, Hunted? Okay? There's this new show, Hunted, and I'll probably talk about this in the weeks to come because it's that amazing. Okay? What it is they take 2 people, and it's like a reality show, but 2 people who have paired up and applied, they give them 48 hours and say, hey, in the next 48 hours, at some point, we're going to tell you that you're on the run. You are now a fugitive who's being hunted. And when they do tag them and say, hey, you now have an hour head start, and they give them an hour to get their stuff together and then disappear. And if they can stay disappeared and gone for 28 days, they win $250,000. Okay? So what happens is there's these people that are back in like Command Central that, comb over their social media. They find out their phone numbers. They know their contacts and their names, and they check their phone records and who have they called, and they start doing stuff. And they've got people that have worked for the NSA and, in White House security and Intel and all kinds of stuff. And like some of them are like kind of scary because they know so much about you. And so when they find out something, these people think, oh, I'll just go buy a burner phone. Well, if they happen to catch that they were on camera buying a burner phone at a certain store, which they can, because I don't know how they do this, but they figured it out. They'll go to the store and they'll say, hey, can we have the records? And they get the receipts of the burner phones that were purchased, and then they know the phone, so they can ping it off the towers, and then they can check the records of where the phone is called, even though it's a burner phone and nobody can tell. And then they go and they talk to the people that they have supposedly talked to in secret. I mean, one of them was so amazing. Like these guys, they hand wrote letters, created an email address, and they said, here's what we're going to do. And they sent out letters to everybody saying, here's the email address, and I want you to go in there when you get the letter and write in the draft. Don't actually send it because they could track that. Just write in the draft this key word, and they will know that they've checked in. So they got like 15 people to go to some random, like 48-letter email address and write, and guess what? They figured out that they were communicating that way. Do you know how? Because somehow, I didn't know this, you can know this, the post office takes pictures of the mail, and they noticed that the handwriting for the mail that was going to this house was the same as the handwriting that went to that house. And they're like, oh, look, what do they have in common? Those guys. And so they shut them down. It's amazing. So when I say being perceptive takes practice, these guys are skilled in their craft. Here's one of the things they'll do. They'll find somebody, and we'll pretend Rich is on the run, and Rich is a really sly guy. And he's somehow managed to talk to, I'll just tell you one more, because I want to make you watch it, so you'll understand my references in the weeks ahead. One more. Rich, I could see Rich doing this, because he's like a ladies' man. He could get along with anybody. He's got that cute grin, bald head. He's Rich. I mean, who would say no to Rich? So there's 2 guys who were good friends, but they were also young, like mid-20s, maybe pushing 30. And so they said, here's what we're going to do. We can talk to anybody. And so they just headed off to the beach with their backpacks, and they just started talking to people like, hey, our room got canceled. We need a place to stay. Would you mind if we stayed at your house? So these single ladies would be like, sure. So almost 3 weeks into it, they still haven't been caught. They're like a week away from $250,000. But you know what these guys did? Because they knew that they were social media hawks and they were super cute like Rich and that everybody would be paying attention. They spammed Tinder. with a, have you seen me? And so everybody within like 300 miles of where they thought they might be, there's like 400,000 things saying, have you seen me? That'll pop up on people's Tinder. And guess what? It worked. They found somebody who found them and called the tip line and said, I've seen him. And they caught him. And they caught him. Like, it's crazy. And so they'll go and they'll talk to one of their friends and they'll say, hey, we're so-and-so and we're looking, have you seen Rich? And you think you're all sly. No. Why do you ask? Like, well, we've heard that, you've been in contact with his friend Sharon. Sharon who? And they're trying to be all sly or whatever. Then they'll get back in the car and they'll say, what do you think? And the guys will look at each other and go, they're in there. How could you tell? They totally lied to you. Okay? Well, they've kind of developed mommy sense. Like when moms go and ask their kids, did you eat a cookie? No. Didn't eat a cookie. You just kind of know your kid's done something because they're a teenager now, so who cares about the cookie? These guys that can pick up on the slightest bit of body language, the delay or anything like that. I'm telling you this because you and I can develop the same kind of perceptiveness to notice that God is doing something in us or through us. We just have to know what we're looking for and we have to pay attention. So, let's look at Jesus because Jesus was obviously a very perceptive person. And we're going to be in John chapter 4. Excuse me. Now, I will give this disclaimer, okay? Jesus is a very perceptive person. We get that. Jesus, would notice things. But Jesus was also Jesus, and so I don't want you to think, that I don't recognize the fact that Jesus probably knew what he was going to notice before he saw it. Like, I get it, okay? But I think there's some things that we can learn from Jesus. And so in John chapter 4, there's this story of Jesus who is walking. I'll just start in verse 1. I'm not going to read the whole thing. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to summarize it for you. But let me start it by reading. John chapter 4. When Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself didn't baptize, only his disciples, he left Judea and he departed again for Galilee. So Jesus is in one place. The guys aren't exactly happy about what he's doing, so he's like, okay, fine, I'll go someplace else. And he goes to Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria. And so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, who's weary, he's tired, he's been journeying, he's on the run, he's being hunted. Jesus sits down from his journey. He's sitting beside the well, and it's about the 6th hour. So it's like the middle of the day. It's high noon. So here's what's going to happen. Well, Jesus is sitting there. You can read. We'll come back to the verses. While Jesus is sitting there, a woman shows up. A woman who's a Samaritan. And Jews and Samaritans don't mix. It's kind of like the south side of town, the other side of the tracks, like we aren't those people. It's the Bloods and the Crips. They just, not going to do it. And so one of the opposite shows up, and normally what would happen is a Jewish man would just ignore a Samaritan woman. But Jesus doesn't, so he has a conversation with her. And he asks her, hey, get me some water. Would you get me some water? And she's like, what? Why are you talking to me? You shouldn't do this. Don't you understand that? And she gives him a lesson. And then Jesus says, whoa, if you understand the gift of God, then you would have asked for living water. And then she changes the subject and says, well, you don't even have a cup or anything to draw the water with. Are you better than Jacob, who built this well and drank from this well? I mean, who do you think you are? And Jesus goes on to explain a little bit more about the water that is going to go on and fill you up and satisfy you forever. Now, Jesus isn't talking about water. He's talking about himself. He's trying to get her to move into a conversation, and he's noticing how she's playing along. And finally she goes, okay, yeah, give me this water. And then Jesus does one of these, whoop, change. He goes, now that you're thirsty, why don't you go get your husband? Oh, that's like an out-of-bounds thing because this woman, we find out, she doesn't have a husband. As a matter of fact, she's had 5 husbands, and the guy that she's with now isn't her husband. So she's kind of what some people would say, a sleep-around Sue. But then I've heard other people say, well, women didn't have a whole lot of authority or something. Maybe she was actually one of those abused people. Regardless, she didn't have a husband, and she was staying with a guy who wasn't her husband. And so she changes the subject, and she starts talking, well, I can tell that you're a prophet. let's talk about where people should worship. You Jews say this, us Samaritans say this, and Jesus answers her question and says, it's not where you worship, it's how you worship, in spirit and in truth. And then she says, hey, there's a Messiah, and when he comes, he'll explain everything to us. And at that point, Jesus, at the end of the story, says, I'm him. Okay, so I don't know if you know what we can learn from this, but we're going to explore it, because the ultimate purpose of this story is Jesus is revealing that he is enough for anybody. He's enough for anybody, regardless of circumstance. But there's a few things he noticed on the way to continue his interaction, to see God working in him and through him. So, first thing that he notices, if you go to verse 7 and 8, a woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink, for his disciples had gone away to buy some food. Okay. Here's what he noticed. If you're taking notes, you might want to just write this down. The first thing that you might want to notice, if you're going to experience a win and God using you, is just notice who's around. Notice who's around. And it might be in your own home. It might be one of your kids, and you just kind of have to notice, what's up with Tommy? Or maybe it's, as a kid, you notice your parents, and I wonder what's going on with mom and dad. Just notice who's around. Maybe you're out at a store. Maybe you're at a restaurant. It doesn't matter. Just notice who's around. Okay? It's as easy as that. The very first thing that you can notice is who's around. And so, as Jesus goes by, he's by himself, this woman shows up that he shouldn't interact with, but he starts interacting with her because he notices that she's around. Here's just kind of an encouragement to you. If Jesus is available to anyone, are you willing to be available to anyone? Because this is, if you're going to experience God using you or doing something in you, you're going to have to make yourself available to anyone. Just notice who's around. Oh, did I go backwards? Or did I not show you that yet? Sorry. All right. Okay, so Jesus starts talking to the woman. And when he's given the opportunity, Jesus points her to more than what she currently sees. And so there's a few things that you might be able to learn from Jesus that we can pick up on when we're interacting with people. I'm going to go through them relatively quickly, and then we can all go make our Super Bowl plans and do whatever we're going to do on this cold February day. So, and one more kind of tidbit here. I don't want you to think that in your interactions with people that every interaction you have will or even should turn out like Jesus's. In other words, not every interaction we have when we notice something about someone needs to end in us even talking about Jesus. It might just be that we just need to offer some other kind of good news because they're not interested in Jesus right now. They're just interested in somebody who actually cares about their side of the story or about what's going on in their life. Or we'll just sit there with them and not say anything. Okay, so Jesus is obviously, he's really good at this, but not every one of our interactions with people is going to end up like this, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's not a win. So, if we're going to notice what God is doing in us or through us, we need to constantly be asking questions. I'm going to give you 5 questions that we need to ask about the people that we're interacting with when we notice something. And so, one of the things, we're just going to notice, and we're going to ask, are they, and I'm going to give you some questions. So when Jesus asks her for water, what do you notice about her response? Because here's what she said in verse 9. The Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? And then the Bible tells us, for Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Okay, Jews are like the perfect race, and then Samaritans are like a mixed race, is kind of what it comes down to. So this woman says, how are you, a Jew, asking me, a Samaritan, for a drink? And a woman. What would you notice about that? I just want you to think about it. Don't just wait for me to fill it in. Do you notice anything interesting about that? Like, how is she feeling? And have you ever been in any conversations with somebody else where you've noticed, are they uncomfortable? Because I've sat down with people before, and, well, sometimes we'll we'll ask a question. And the person will look at me like, I don't know you. I mean, you can tell that they're just uncomfortable. I'll try and meet somebody. We'll be out at a store, at a restaurant. Yeah, hey, how you doing? You ever run into somebody and you're just trying to be nice? Like in Minnesota, when we drive by, this is where I'm from, when we drive down the road, you can drive out of a neighborhood and every car that you meet, it's like, you just, hand on the wheel. Yep, yep, yep. Okay, I visited my parents in December. They're down in Florida, and everybody drives golf carts. So what do you do down there? You're driving your golf cart, and every old person you pass. Yes. Okay, until you find somebody who's not exactly comfortable waving because they're from the north. Okay, like they're a Patriots fan. And so they just go by, which is why we cheer for the Falcons.
Some of us wave.
You've been trained because being perceptive takes practice, and you've learned how to do this because you're looking more like Jesus, and we appreciate that. But there's just people sometimes that aren't comfortable. So Jesus notices she's not comfortable. She's like, who are you to ask me, a woman from Samaria, for a drink of water? Now, if you've ever gotten the brush off from somebody in one of those uncomfortable moments, you might have just shied away and like, okay, sorry about that. Don't mean to bother you. Like if you've ever been in a store, I've been in a store before, and I noticed that there was somebody there, and so I needed some help, and so I'd go and ask them if I could get some help, and what do? I don't work here. Okay. Can I help you then? Like that freaks them out. They don't know what to do, but that's okay. You just deal with the discomfort. So how did Jesus deal with the discomfort? If somebody's uncomfortable, here's what I think Jesus did. Jesus just literally offered them a gift. Here's what it says. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that's saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. So Jesus is saying, hey, if you knew what was here and available, you'd have asked for it, you'd have gotten it. He offers a gift. Okay, so you can do the same thing. You and I can do the same thing. We can offer a gift. Hi, Daddy. Hi, Judah. Yeah. Hey, we love them. They can come in here anytime. We'll let them run around. It doesn't bother me. Sometimes what people need, and again, this is what it looks like. It might not always look like Jesus. Jesus is talking about, hey, if you knew the gift of God that was before you, you'd ask for living water, I'd have given it to you. You probably couldn't say that. But if you notice somebody's uncomfortable, maybe somebody's off alone on their own, maybe they look like they're sad or they're lonely or they just don't even want to be around people, you might have to take the risk because you've noticed, and you might have to step over there, and maybe they just need somebody to notice. Hey, are you okay? And they might say yes. They might say, no, I'm horrible. And you have to decide, are you prepared to offer them something? And now you might not have an answer for them, but you might be able to just sit there while they cry. You might be able to just listen to what they're saying. I don't know. But we can offer something. And so if you've ever been around somebody who's lost a family member, or there's been some tragedy that's happened, and you don't know what to say, that's okay. Sometimes the best thing to say is nothing and just show up, like Job's friends did, and sit with them. That can be the best gift, because in their discomfort, they don't need words. They need comfort. And the best thing that you can offer sometimes is just the gift of your presence. So, what is God showing you that the people around you need? And in their discomfort, what do they need? Do they need you to leave? That might be the gift they need, and it's okay. Or do they need you to stick through the awkwardness and stay and let them know, hey, I'm not leaving you. We go on. Jesus has a few other things that happen here. We notice that in verse 11. The woman says to him, sir, you don't have anything to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well, and he drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock. So she asks a lot of questions. It might even be that she was challenging him. Like, who do you think you are? Not only are you asking me, who's a woman of Samaria in the middle of the day for water, but are you really better than Jacob? You don't even have anything to get the water with. Are you really that stupid? Like, I don't know what the tone is. It could have been that. It could have been she was just curious. I know that I've experienced people who have not exactly been pleased with my trying to engage them. But here's what I think Jesus noticed about her questions. I think he noticed that she was at least willing to continue talking. I mean, the easiest thing she could have said, hey, will you get me some water? No. Done, right? I mean, that shuts it down. Now, Jesus probably would have figured out a way to make it work. But she could have just said, But she continued. And so when Jesus notices that, what does Jesus do? He explains a little bit more. Now, some of you have been out to eat with me before, and it's not every time, but a lot of times if we're at a restaurant or whatever, and when the waiter or waitress comes over and, hey, my name's so-and-so, I'll be your server today, and, what can I get you to drink kind of stuff, pay attention to their name, you'll get their name, and then they'll bring you your drink back, and you place your order, and maybe when they bring out your food or an appetizer or something, say, hey, look, in a little bit, we're going to pray for our food. Is there anything we can pray for you? And I'll say that. And sometimes you'll get the no. Sometimes you get the, yeah, would you pray for my mom? Or, here's something that's going on. Sometimes they'll literally break down right at your chair or your table. And then I've had a few that are like this, just a little bit like I think this woman is, where they've literally said, why do you care? Okay. Or, hey, we're going to pray in a little bit, and they say, do you really think it matters? So what would you do? Because in that right there, what I think Jesus noticed and what we can notice is even the opposition. I think we can notice that they're willing to continue talking, but they want to know something more. So what do? Well, here's what Jesus did. Jesus answered her questions. Who are you? You don't have anything to draw the water with. Are you greater than than Jacob? He drank from this well. His animals drank from this well. Jesus goes right on and he says, ho, ho, ho. He says in verse 13, everyone who drinks this water is going to be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water that I give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. Jesus basically tells her, I'm going to answer your question. Who do I think I am? And he's basically saying, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something even better than that. This water is not going to satisfy you. The water that I'm willing to give you is. So Jesus has basically gotten past her discomfort. He noticed it, but he's like, hey, don't worry about it. And now he's noticed that even in her discomfort, she's willing to continue talking. And so he just answers a few questions. That's what we should do, because a lot of times, guys, I think we're afraid to actually answer questions. If you're following along in YouVersion, there's a section in 1 Peter there that, just as a reminder, many of you know it, but I want to throw it out there. In 1 Peter, they're talking about having conversations with people and people noticing whether or not there's something about you. Like, do you really care? And he says, I'm just going to go, it's 1 Peter chapter 3. I'm just going to start in verse 14. Even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake. Okay? Now, again, I don't know for sure if this is what her tone was, but maybe she's just being called out she's calling out Jesus. Like, who do you think you are? And Jesus is just trying to offer her living water. And so, it's just not a good thing. But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you'll be blessed. Have no fear of them, or don't be troubled. But in your hearts, honor Christ as the Lord, as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks for the reason for the hope that's in you. But do it with gentleness and respect. That seems fair, right? And so when I was sitting with a server one time and I asked him, hey, we're going to pray in a minute. Is there anything I can pray for you? Like, do you really think it matters? I had an opportunity, and actually, I do. Do you want to know why I think it matters? And they said, sure. You know, it's not like the walls came down. Oh, please tell me. No, sure. And so I shared with them. And it was around the time that Kim had been in the hospital and literally was hemorrhaging, and they were moving her from the floor that she was in to the floor down below, and many of us were there, and she was literally going to die. They'd punctured her lung, and they couldn't find where the bleeding was coming from, so they were going to have to open her up and figure it out. Now, just so you know, if you get a hole in your lung, like it doesn't just spontaneously heal, okay? You get a hole in your lung, you're in serious trouble, okay? You have a collapsed lung. I mean, I don't know. Just talk to Hunter or some other doctor who's here. But it's a problem, okay? I know that much. And so we're in the lobby, and we're just praying. And we're praying for Kim, and we're praying for her to be healed, for Jesus to come in and just fix it. We don't even know how he's going to do it, but we're not even praying for the doctors. We're praying that the doctors don't have to do it because Jesus already did. And guess what? The doctors come. We don't even know that they're there. They're waiting until that we're done praying, and they come and they tell us, hey, the bleeding stopped, and we couldn't find the hole. So I share this with the servant, and they're like, okay, fair enough. And they shared their prayer request, and we were able to pray with them. But it's just noticing that, hey, look, if people have questions, it doesn't mean that they're against you. It just means that they're willing to continue the conversation. Don't be afraid of entering into it and answering their questions. Always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have. Just do it with gentleness and respect. And so I think Jesus was doing that. So this woman's awkward and uncomfortable. Jesus says, don't worry about it. This woman's got questions, so she's willing to continue. Jesus is like, okay, let me just tell you a little bit more. In verse 15 and 16, Jesus says, or the woman says, sir, give me this water. I don't want to be thirsty anymore. I don't want to have to come here. And then Jesus' answer to that, she's like, okay, I want the water. I want this living water. I want the stuff that won't make me thirsty anymore so I don't have to keep coming to get water. And Jesus' answer is, go call your husband and come here. Okay, what do we notice here? I think what we can notice is that this woman, she's just tired. She's tired of being the one who has to go and get water. Normally the woman would go out there first part of the day and the last part of the day, and they'd go together. She's there in the middle of the day, and she's there by herself. When you're talking to somebody, pay attention to whatever it is that they're saying, because what they might be looking for is just relief. You talk to a single parent, and you ask them how things are going, how's your kids, how's your work or whatever, and you can just hear the tiredness in their voice. Like, I just need a break. When things aren't going well and it's just one thing after another, you can hear them saying, I hate my job, I just wish I had something different. Or somebody who's in the hospital and they're just not getting better, and their parent or their husband or their kid or whatever has been there for days and days and weeks and months, and they just don't know what's wrong, and they're not getting better. And they just want it to end. Notice when people are looking for relief. We've got people who've got newborns around here. They're not here today because they're probably looking for relief. I pray that they're getting some sleep. But it's not that hard to notice when people are looking for relief. So what do you do when you notice that? Okay? Here's what Jesus did. She was looking for relief from something that Jesus said, no. You still don't quite get it. I want to offer you something even better than that. And so here's what Jesus did. He pushed in. He pushed in. You notice somebody who's looking for relief. That's good. Don't just say, I'll pray for you. Don't just immediately offer to help. Those are good things. But let's push in. This is one of those times where, okay, just imagine this. Here's a woman. We haven't had this part of the conversation yet. But this is a woman who has had 5 husbands, and the dude she's staying with now is not her husband. Okay, and she's there, and they're having a conversation. Jesus knows this, because he's Jesus. Jesus knows this, and what does he do? He brings it up. Like, this is one of those times where if you're with your friends and something like this happened, and your friend suddenly says something that's the big elephant in the room, you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe he went there. You did not. Like, Jesus totally made everything uncomfortable. She's like, I just want some water. And he's like, well, hold on. Let's talk about your husband, your sex life. Let's talk about that. What? Here's what I want you to think about. Are you willing? If you want to see God do something, you're going to have to open up places where God needs to do something. This woman doesn't just need water. She can get it herself. That's not a God thing. She needs living water, and she's looking for regular water. And no. She needs satisfaction. She needs relief from her life, not just from her thirst. And so Jesus goes there. He pushes in. He goes a little bit deeper. Here's what that looks like for you. Sometimes you might be sitting there, and a question like ask them about this will pop into your head, and you're so well trained in ignoring it that you just dismiss it. Like, I'm not going to say that. You hear this thought, like, maybe I should say this, and you're not going to do it. Like, I remember sitting, when I was doing student pastor work, I remember sitting with this girl, and she was telling me about how bad things were and how bad things were at home and all this kind of stuff. And literally, I have this voice that says, are you pregnant? And I know the answer to the question for me is no. So I'm like, that must not be for me. And so I just kind of interrupted her, and I'm like, are you pregnant? She lost it. The reason she was so worried and upset about how things were at home because she was petrified about what was going to happen when her parents found out that she was pregnant because she's 16 years old. So now what? See, guys, it takes us paying attention to what God is saying to be willing to push in. And so pay attention to those random things that might pop into your head. I don't know how it works for Jesus. He's Jesus. But I know that I've seen it happen in me, and you might have to just take a guess. And it's okay, because if you're wrong, they'll just say no. Like if I would have asked her, are you pregnant? She could have very easily said no. Why'd you ask? I don't know. I just felt like I was supposed to ask that. I'm glad to know you're not pregnant because you're 16. That would have been that. And you just gone on with the conversation. So don't be afraid to push in. When somebody's looking for relief, don't be afraid to push in. If they're having a rough day, that's fine. But if it's the same conversation about their spouse, about their job, about this part of their life, their parenting or anything like that, don't be afraid to push in. Do you really want to talk about it? Because I think that Jesus has something to say about it. We're almost to the end here. So Jesus asked that, he went there question like, tell me about your husband. And she's honest, and she says, I don't have a husband. And Jesus says, exactly. You don't have a husband. In fact, you've had 5 husbands. The guy you're with now, not even your husband. What you said is true. That's what Jesus says. So it's not like he's trying to beat her up. And her response is, in verse 19, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. And I don't know if that would be my first response if somebody came to me and started telling me like my junk. I don't know if my first response would be, I can tell that you're a prophet. My first response would probably be something a whole lot less holy. I can tell you're a jerk, or something like that. But she can tell he's a prophet, and so she changes the subject. So, when you're pushing in, when you're asking somebody about how is it really going, what's happening in your life, could it be this, whatever, you're talking to them, you're interacting, and they start changing the subject. You might want to pay attention to that. Are they changing the subject? Is there something that they're avoiding? Like this happens all the time with kids. I remember one time in particular, my dad had assigned me some chores that I had to do, and I didn't do them. And I knew when he got home, he was going to ask me, hey, were you able to do, X, Y, and Z? I left you a note before I left for work, and he would. He'd write out, here's what I need you to do today. I loved my summers. And I hadn't done them. And so when my dad got home, dude, I was all about his day. Dad, how was your day? Did you sell anything? Did you see anybody? How many things were delivered? He owned a TV, appliance, power equipment store. So, I could talk about employees. I could talk about what he sold. I could talk about new orders, new products that were coming out. I'm 16 years old. I work for him too sometimes. And then he'd say, hey, I noticed whatever didn't get done. And he's about to ask. I'm like, oh, did you hear about Nate? That was my brother. So I'm about to narc out my brother. I'm like, he got in trouble. Let's just change the subject. And so I told a story about Nate, and he calls him in there, whatever. Then he comes back to it, and he's like, so what about, did you get the wood out at the back done? And like 3 or 4 times I'm changing the subject. Did you hear what Mom said? You know what's for dinner? Like just a completely goofy, ridiculous guy. I'm changing the subject. You ever been around somebody like that where it's uncomfortable, you're getting too close, don't talk about it, and they change the subject? Pay attention to it. Because the woman changes the subject. And she says, hey, I can tell you're a prophet. Some people say we should worship here. Some people say we should worship there. That would be kind of like, here's what I think. That'd be like you're sitting with a friend and you have that hard push-in question. You say, are you having an affair? And they answer by saying, you think I should redecorate my living room? Okay, like it's that big of a difference. So what does Jesus do? If they're changing the subject and they're trying to avoid something, here's what we need to do when we notice that happening. Stick with the truth. Stick with the truth, because Jesus, he talks about her husband, but he also talks about worship. And he says it's not about the place that you worship, it's about how you worship, and my people will worship in spirit and in truth. But let me warn you about something, okay? One of our values here is grace and truth, okay? You have to have them both. If you have too much grace, and it's possible, because grace without truth is too much grace. It's not like, shame on you, you shouldn't do that anymore, that was wrong. It's like, oh, I'll forgive you, we'll give you another chance. No. Kids don't learn very well that way. And if it's all truth, shame on you, you shouldn't have done that. I'm not giving you any more chances, you're grounded for a month. That's no good either. Okay? This is one of our values. Here's what we need to know about truth. Truth is on a spectrum, okay? And so if you're going to stick with the truth, it's okay. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to be on either end of the spectrum. You don't want to be on the end where you abuse people with the truth of their sin and the consequences of their sin. You don't want to be on that end. But you also don't want to be on the end where you avoid talking about the truth of people's sin and what they've done. And so, it's extremely uncomfortable still. But I'll sit with somebody and I'll talk to them. And if God is telling me, hey, ask her if she's pregnant, that's completely uncomfortable. There's nothing fun about that. You don't want to sit in front of somebody who is pouring their heart out and just literally spit out something that is pointing out their sin. But you also can't avoid it. And I know that in asking that question, I'm not trying to abuse her with it. I'm not going to hand over a scarlet letter and say, here you go, you whore. Yeah, because that doesn't sound anything like Jesus, does it? But you can't abuse and you can't avoid. You have to just stick to the truth. And so here's some opportunities where you might have and be able to notice things, okay? You might have some parenting, not you, but you might notice other people's parenting. And you have some advice that you might be able to give them, or some observations about things that are working or not working very well. You have an opportunity to stick with the truth. If they're avoiding the subject, they're just making excuses for, oh, he's just shy. Oh, it's just the stage. Oh, he only does that with people he doesn't know, or things like that. That's okay sometimes, but if it's a consistent pattern and God is telling you, I'm not saying you have to do this all the time, but if God is saying, hey, you might want to step into that, don't be afraid to step into that and actually stick with the truth. Say, I'm sorry. Is it a legitimate excuse if your kid's just shy for them to be rude? I mean, you say it however you say it. Depending on the level of relationship will determine how you say it. But don't be afraid of it. Same with marriage. You got friends who are married, husbands and wives. You have opportunity. You make observations. It might be time to stick with the truth. They're changing the subject. Hey, how's your wife? I don't want to talk about it. Literally, you ever had that conversation? Maybe we need to talk about it. And do it. Financial advice. People, how they spend their money. There are all kinds of things that you guys can talk about. You just need to be listening to God. What is he saying to you? And then don't be afraid to bring it up, but also don't abuse them with it. We're not trying to point out everybody's sin. So the story ends simply this way. The woman says, look, I know the Messiah is coming, the one who's called the Christ. When he comes, he'll tell us everything. And Jesus says, I who speak to you am he. What is she doing? Besides changing the subject, she's willing to continue the conversation. Jesus has kind of noticed where she's at. And he's led her along the way. Here's the last thing that I think you can probably notice in people sometimes. Sometimes you'll notice that people are just passively waiting. They need a new job. They need their marriage to be better. They want their kids to behave better. They want to complete an education or whatever it is. And they're just kind of passively waiting for it to happen. Their hope is in, when I reach this point, that will be fine. When he does this or she does this, then it will be better. When this happens, it will be better. Jesus points to something completely different. He's not saying when the Messiah comes. It's not a future thing. It's not, let's talk about the past and what's gone wrong. It's not, let's talk about the future when everything's right. Jesus shares the present, current, right now gospel. And so this woman is looking for the Messiah. When he comes, he'll tell us everything. And then she realizes when Jesus says, I who am talking to you, I'm him. So when we are talking to people and we're having our moments and we get to see what God is doing in us or through us, are you able to share the present gospel? And when I say gospel, guys, I'm still telling you, it is not just Jesus was here and he lived and he died and he was buried and he rose again after 3 days and he conquered death. Like, that's all part of the gospel. But what does that mean? Because for this woman, what it means is that you don't have to wait for the Messiah to come because he's here. And what it means for somebody who's in a bad spot in their marriage or in their work or in their personal life is you don't have to wait for it to get better because Jesus is here. And he wants to be in the middle of this with you. He doesn't want to tell you that you need to just tough it out. He doesn't want to tell you that you need to wait for things to get better. He wants to tell you that I'm here with you. That's what Jesus' name, Emmanuel, means. God with us. Emmanuel. God is with us. So what do you do? Now, I struggled with this. I'm just going to be honest. I struggled with this one because there's so many different situations, and what I don't want to do is say this is one and that isn't one. I just wanted to throw out some things that you might notice in your conversations. You're going to have to pay attention to see if people are uncomfortable. If they are you willing to enter into the mess? If people are willing to continue talking, are you willing to answer their questions? If people are looking for some kind of relief, are you willing to offer them something? Like, are you willing to pay attention to what's happening and see what God will do with it? And so, as you're going, as we're walking, and we're talking with people, and we're noticing what God is doing, the question is, will you respond? And all that you can do is invest where the doors are open. Not everybody wants to hear good news. Not everybody is ready for it. Not everybody wants to hear it from you, and that's fine. I don't think I included this in your notes, but let me just tell you, if you invest with where the doors are open, it might just open more doors, because here's how that story ends. The woman leaves. She goes and tells all of her friends. And in verse 39, many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony, where she said, he told me all that I ever did. And so when the Samaritans came to Jesus, they asked him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days, and many more believed because of his word. If you'll invest where the doors are open, it just might open up other doors. So this girl who I was telling you about, who was pregnant, she had her baby. She's finishing up her master's degree now, the mom. She's about to get married in March. I'm still good friends with her. She asked me to do her wedding. I just wasn't able to do it. I'm good friends with her family. All because it was just this little girl in my youth ministry. And God told me something, and I picked up on something. I don't know what it was, but I heard God's voice say, why don't you just ask her this? And got to walk through her with all of that mess. And for the last 10 years, I've been able to walk through this with her. But God is good, and he just wants to be with you in the middle of it. So let me pray for you. When I'm done, you can come up if you've got any stories. I'm going to grab a few marbles because I've got some of my own. There's also a link there at the bottom of your page, and also a new version where you can share your story. You don't have to just do it now. It's open all week. And I also included a YouVersion. If you were on YouVersion, there's a YouVersion devotional that's a week long. It's just got some stories like what I'm talking about, where you just notice something's different. So if you want to hear some other stories, go do that devotion. But let me pray. Father, I pray that you would call to mind the things that we need to see. Maybe it's in our life, and we just notice that you're talking to us about something, and we just need to listen. Or maybe it's in somebody else's life, and we just need to ask or say or go into those uncomfortable places. But Father, I pray that we would experience you on a regular basis doing something in us, speaking to us, that we'd learn to be perceptive because we practice it. And Father, that we'd allow you to do something through us. And so, Father, let us be tools of yours. And let us experience the kind of life that comes from knowing Jesus and just paying attention to what he's doing, wherever and whenever he's doing it. I pray that, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.